Hey there, welcome to my channel. This is part 4 of my DIY series where I'm sharing the entire process of building a wood slat wall for my home gym. So if you just stumbled upon this video, make sure to check out my previous videos. I'll link part 3 on the top of your screen here, or you can find links down in the description box below. Alright, so far, I validated that DIYing my wood slat wall is going to save me a ton of money. I've cut out all the wood slats to size and sanded them down so they're ready to stain. I also trimmed one of my mirrors so that now I have 2 matching mirrors. And I've already installed the backing and frameless mirror clips on my wall. With all that prep work out of the way, it's time to stain the wood slats and paint the wall. I'm going to start with painting, but before I start, I have to protect everything that's not supposed to get paint on it. So I'm covering each of my mirror clips with some painter's tape. These receptacle covers up top will also need to be removed. And I'm placing some painter's tape over them as well. At my baseboard here, some debris was left behind from drilling into the wall, so I'm cleaning that up with a vacuum. When painting, you want to make sure your wall is dust-free so that the paint can adhere properly and so that dust doesn't get trapped underneath the paint. And being my OCD self, I might as well just vacuum the floor as well. Finally, to ensure we only paint the areas we want, I'm going to put painter's tape on all 4 sides of the wall. And lastly, I'm taping over this opening as well. Now to protect the floor, I'm using this plastic drop cloth that I can toss out after my project is done. This drop cloth is really large for what I need, and because I hate being wasteful, I'm going to cut it down to size. Once that's done, I'm just pressing it onto my bottom strip of tape here, and that way I now have this skirt off the wall to catch any paint dripping. Now we are ready to paint this wall. So this is the paint I had left over in my garage to use for this project. It's been sitting in the garage for some time, so I'm giving it a good mix with my paint paddle and drill. But after mixing and painting it onto a piece of cardboard, I realized that this might be a little too light of a gray. What I'm looking for is something closer to the color of my gym mats. So I had to make a quick trip to Home Depot and I picked up a gallon of ash gray paint. I was pleasantly surprised that it came with this really cool gadget thing that's used to open the cap and also acts as a pourer. I'm pouring some paint onto my tray and I'm going to gather a generous amount of paint onto my roller. I'm pretty sure this color is what I'm looking for, but to be sure, I'm just going to paint the area behind my mirror first. So I'm painting this wall, and a tip for anyone who doesn't know is to go slow, because if you roll too fast, the paint will splatter all over the place. And I found that out the hard way. Also, if you've never painted your house before, get ready for a workout because paint is really heavy. It is nothing like your typical classroom paint. It's thick like glue, and I eventually started using 2 hands just to hold my roller steady. By the way, if you're wondering where I got the tray and roller, Home Depot sells these amazing paint kits that include everything you need in it. If you're not sure what you need, grab a kit with a little bit of everything and it'll make your life so much easier. Alright, I'm basically done here. Now, while that dries, I'm going to start staining the wood slats. In my first video, I was in between a few stains. Because I read that stain looks differently on different types of wood, I did some test stains and I'm so thankful I did. This one on the right is Special Walnut Stain, which I thought was a stain for me. But when I made my test stain, I knew right away that it was a no. It was too dark, and I wanted more of the wood grain to show through. The next two here is Wood Stain Effects in Aged Gray. This one is 2 coats of stain, and this one is 1 coat of stain. I'm not looking for this wall to be super dark, so I like the 1 coat of stain. But looking at my test stain, it looks a little green or olivey, which I really wasn't expecting. So that's when I saw that Home Depot also has wood effects in rustic brown, and that's these two here. This is 2 coats of stain, and this is 1 coat of stain. And I'm definitely feeling the 1 coat of stain. Just to be sure that rustic brown is the real winner, I applied 1 coat of brown on 4 wood slats. I stuck them onto the gray wall here that is now fully dried, and I'm now officially convinced that rustic brown is the true winner. This is exactly how I envisioned it, and the gray wall pairs perfectly with the warm wood tones. Now that I've confirmed the stain color and the wall color, I went ahead and finished painting the rest of my wall. I started by outlining the edges of my wall with a nylon brush. Then I moved to the roller to finish off the wall for a smooth, professional finish. Because of all the prep work I did earlier, painting this wall only took about 5 minutes. And this entire wall only used about 1/3 of the gallon of paint I got. So I guess the rest of the paint will be left over for another project. Now, while this wall is air drying, I'm going to start staining my wood slats. Back at Home Depot, when I purchased my paint, I had also picked up some tack cloths. These are disposable wipes that are super sticky like beeswax, and they are really good for wiping off dust or sawdust in between sandings. Now, before I start staining my wood, I'm going to have to apply a pre-stain conditioner. Then I will stain with my rustic brown and finish the project up with a water-based top coat. I'm going to be using these nylon brushes which have plastic bristles, and of course my tack cloth to wipe things down in between. To use it, I'm unfolding it and then just lightly crumpling it up into a ball like this. Now, if you don't know what the pre-stain conditioner and top coat is for, head over to part 1 of the series where I explain all about stains and why I'm using them. I've also dropped the link to that video in the description box below. As I'm laying out my wood slats, I'm making sure that the stain side is facing up. Then I'm using my tack cloth to wipe each piece. So starting with my pre-stain, I'm giving it a good mix and then applying it liberally onto my wood slats. I read that you want to apply stain after the pre-stain conditioner is dry to the touch. Not moist, not cold, but dry. But you also want to apply your stain within 2 hours of applying your conditioner. I've got a lot of wood to stain, so I'm going to be working in batches to keep things moving along. After letting that soak into the wood for a minute, I'm going to wipe away any excess conditioner with this disposable microfiber towel. Then I'm going to move on to the next group, starting with wiping them down with a tack cloth. If your tack cloth ever starts feeling less tacky, all you have to do is unfold it and crumple it back up on a new side. This will renew its tackiness so you can use it multiple times before having to toss it out. So I finished all of my 22-inch pieces, and it looks like the first group I started with is already dry to the touch. Now, how quickly these dry will depend on your climate. Right now in my area, it's pretty hot, so I'm not surprised these were able to dry so quickly. Now to apply my stain, I'm giving it a really good mix as well. Since pigments tend to separate, you always want to give things a mix before each use. Now I'm applying my stain liberally, but because I want my stain to be on the lighter side, I'm wiping off the excess within a few minutes of applying the stain. Also, before moving on to the next wood slat, I'll run my brush from top to bottom with one single stroke to help even everything out. And after wiping off the excess, this is what the first batch is looking like. I'm really excited about this color. I think it's going to look amazing and give my home gym that high-end feel I've been envisioning. After staining all my wood slats, I moved on to staining the edges as well, since an unstained edge would stick out like a sore thumb. I'm using this mini sponge roller that came with my paint kit, and I'm being careful only to stain the edges. If I happen to get any stain on the face, I just wipe it off quickly and it's like nothing ever happened. Now, because these slats were cut from plywood, the different wood layers absorb stain differently, which is causing this variation in color. My slats will be sitting pretty close together, so I don't think it'll be too noticeable. But I'm also applying a lot of stain and not wiping off the excess since I want the edge to be as dark as possible. Once both edges are stained, I left them aside to fully dry. Now moving on to my 3-inch pieces. And I'm going to be doing this on a table because staining on the floor was really breaking my back. I'm using some plastic drop cloth to protect my table. Then I'm laying out the wood pieces with the stain side facing up. Following the same process, I started by wiping down each slat with a tack cloth. Next, I applied a coat of pre-stain conditioner and wiped away any excess with a paper towel before letting the pieces air dry. Once they're ready, I applied the stain to a few pieces at a time and wiped off the excess before moving on to the next group. And here's what the wood is looking like freshly stained. Now before calling it done, I'm also going to stain the edges. And now this batch is done. It's finally time to stain the full height wood slats. This step took me the longest. Since each slat was 90 inches long, I was consistently moving back and forth to make sure I didn't miss any spots on the wood. Thankfully, I'm able to apply the pre-stain in batches, but when it came to staining, I had to do them one at a time so that the stain wouldn't sit on the wood for too long. What helped tremendously was this little sponge roller and a disposable microfiber towel. The sponge roller was great at applying an even stain with just a few passes, and the towel was absorbent enough to reuse several times before having to use a new towel. Without these tools, it would have taken me much longer than an hour to finish this step, so highly recommend if you're staining a lot of full height wood slats. So this is what everything is looking like after staining. I'm noticing that the stain doesn't seem to be very consistent throughout the wood slats, and I'm not sure why. So if you're watching and have some thoughts or ideas, please comment down below and let me know your thoughts. But as a whole, I actually think the stain looks really nice. The variation adds a lot of character to the wood slats and gives them a more natural look. But before installing them, I'll probably rearrange the slats a bit to evenly distribute the lighter and darker pieces across the wall. That way, the color variations look intentional and balanced. Now that everything has been stained and fully dried, it's time for our last step, which is to apply a finished top coat. But before I do, I'm gonna give each wood slat a very light sand with 150 grit sandpaper. When applying stain onto wood, the solution will raise the wood grain as the wood absorbs these products. This gives the wood a bumpy texture, so it's a good idea to give it a light sanding to smooth out the surface. And of course, make sure to wipe it down with a tack cloth afterwards. When I'm applying the top coat, I'm applying the product all over the wood and then making a final sweep from end to end so that it's as evenly distributed as possible. And for top coat, you don't need to wipe anything off once applied. For this project, I'm using the water-based polyurethane by Behr in matte for a modern and natural look. Sometimes when you apply top coat, it'll deepen the color of your stain. And this is even more true for gloss and satin. Matte will be the best at maintaining your original stain color. And I can say that with confidence because I did a test run and the colors with and without a matte top coat were practically the same. You might have also noticed that all the stain products I'm using are from Behr, and that was on purpose. It's always a good idea to stick with the same brand throughout a project. Since manufacturers will typically test their products to work together within the same product line, sticking with one brand can help you achieve best results. But regardless of what you do, it's always a good idea to do a test run so you know what to expect and aren't taken by surprise. For top coats, you can apply as many layers as you want for added protection, but for my purposes, one layer of top coat would be sufficient. So once top coat was applied to everything, I let them sit overnight to fully dry. Now, one thing I still needed to address was the receptacles up above my mirrors. I definitely can't leave this as white, and instead of going out and buying ones in black, I'm actually just going to spray paint them. So first thing I'll have to do is unscrew them from the wall. This pass-through is pretty easy, but the outlet will require a bit more work. If you don't know how to do this safely, please watch my part 3 video where I walk through how to take an outlet out of service. I basically give you an electrical 101 in 60 seconds, so you know enough to handle these wires safely. I will also add that metals can carry an electrical current, so when you are touching the copper wires with your metal tools, the electrical current will travel to the metal in your tools. But as long as you keep your hands on the plastic or rubber handle of your tools, you will be fine. And if you accidentally touch the metal, you will feel the electrical current. And you'll know because it'll feel like a fuzzy, tingling, numbing sensation running through your hand and arm. Don't ask me how I know, but if that happens, just let go of your tool and you'll be fine. Of course, if you're not lazy like I am, you can shut off the power to the outlet from your breaker panel. Or if you don't feel comfortable handling electrical wires, the best thing to do is getting help from an electrician. So after removing the outlet, I taped these up and gave everything 2 coats of paint, letting the paint fully dry in between coats. And these turned out really nice. I used flat black and it really gave these a more modern upscale look. And here's what the cover plates look like as well. By now, the paint has dried, so it's time to rip off our painter's tape. I'm removing all the tape on the wall except for the bottom skirt so that it can continue to catch any debris and keep my floors clean. Alright, now that all the painting and staining is complete, it's finally time to bring everything together. But I'm going to save the installation for the next and final video. So be sure to check back for part 5 where I'll install the wood slats and mirrors and reveal the finished wall. If you've been following along with this project, you won't want to miss this final transformation. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down in the comment box below. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.